Recursive Numeric Sequences in Africa by Ron Eglash from CCRU's Abstract Culture Digital Hyperstition. This text retrieved from CCRU.net. 1. Nonlinear additive series in African cultures. The counting numbers 1, 2, 3, etc. can be thought of as a kind of iteration, but only in the most trivial way. It is true that we could produce accounting numbers from a recursive loop, that is, a function in which the output at one stage becomes the input for the next, x times n plus 1 minus x times n plus 1. But this is a strictly linear series, increasing by the same amount each time, the numeric equivalent of a staircase. Addition can, however, produce non-linear series. And there are at least two examples of non-linear additive series in African cultures. The triangular numbers 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, etc. are used in a game called Tarum Beta in East Africa. Figure 1 shows how these numbers are derived from the shape of triangles of increasing size, and how the numeric series can be created by a recursive loop. As in the case of certain formal age grade initiation practices, the simple versions are used by smaller children, and the higher iterations picked up with increasing age. While there is no indication of a formal relationship in this instance, there is still an underlying parallel between the iterative concept of aging common to many African cultures, each individual passing through multiple turns of the life cycle, and the iterative nature of the triangular number series. Another nonlinear additive series was found in archaeological evidence from North Africa. Badawi, 1965, noted what appears to be use of the Fibonacci series in the layout of the temples of ancient Egypt. Using a slightly different approach, I found a visually distinct example of this series in the successive chambers of the Temple of Karnak, as shown in Figure 2a. Figure 2b shows how these numbers can be generated using a recursive loop. This formal scaling plan may have been derived from the non-numeric versions of scaling architecture we see throughout Africa. An ancient set of balanced weights, apparently used in Egypt, Syria, and Palestine circa 1200 BCE, also appear to employ the Fibonacci sequence. This is a particularly interesting use, since one of the striking mathematical properties of the sequence is that one can create any positive integer through addition of selected members, a property that makes it ideal for application to balanced measurements. There is no evidence that ancient Greek mathematicians knew of the Fibonacci sequence. There is use of the Fibonacci sequence in Minoan design, but Preziosi, 1968, cites evidence indicating that this could have been brought from Egypt by Minoan architectural workers employed at Kahun. 2. Discrete self-organization in Owari. Figure 3a shows a board game that is played throughout Africa in many different versions variously termed Ayo, Bao, Giothi, Leila, Mancala, Omwesu, Owari, Tai, and Songo, among many other names. Boards cut into stones, some of extreme antiquity, have been found from Zimbabwe to Ethiopia. The game is played by scooping pebble or seed counters from one cup and sequentially placing one each in the cups that follow. The goal is to have the last counter land on a cup with only one or two counters already in it, which allows the player to capture those counters. In the Ghanaian game of Owari, players are known for utilizing a series of moves they call a marching group. They note that if the number of counters in a series of cups each decrease by 1, e.g. 4, 3, 2, 1, the entire pattern can be replicated with a right shift by scooping from the largest cup, and that if left uninterrupted, it can propagate in this way as far as needed, Figure 3b. As simple as it seems, this concept of a self-replicating pattern is at the heart of some sophisticated mathematical concepts. John von Neumann, who played a pivotal role in the development of the modern digital computer, was also a founder of the mathematical theory of self-organizing systems. Initially, von Neumann's theory was to be based on self-reproducing physical robots. Why work on a theory of self-reproducing machines? I believe the answer can be found in von Neumann's social outlook. Hymes's 1984 biography emphasizes how the disorder of von Neumann's precarious youth as a Hungarian Jew was reflected in his adult efforts to impose a strict mathematical order in various aspects of the world. In von Neumann's application of game theory to social science, for example, Hymes writes that his Hobbesian assumptions were conditioned by the harsh political realities of his Hungarian existence. His enthusiasm for the use of nuclear weapons against the Soviet Union is also attributed to this experience. During the Hickson Symposium in 1951, he was asked if computing machines could be built such that they could repair themselves if damaged in air raids, and replied that, quote, "There is no doubt that one can design machines which, under suitable circumstances, will repair themselves." End quote. His work on nuclear radiation tolerance for the AEC in 1954 to 1955 included biological effects as well as machine operation. Putting these factors together, I cannot escape the creepy conclusion that von Neumann's interest in self-reproducing automata originated in fantasies about having a more perfect mechanical progeny survive the nuclear purging of organic life on this planet. Models for physical robots turned out to be too complex, and at the suggestion of his colleague Stanislav Ulam, von Neumann settled for a graphic abstraction, cellular automata, as they came to be called. In this model, Figure 4a, each square in a grid is said to be either alive or dead, that is, in one of two possible states. The iterative rules for changing the state of any one square are based on the 8 nearest neighbors, e.g., if 3 or more nearest neighbors are full, the cell becomes full in the next iteration. At first, researchers carried out these cellular automata experiments on checkered tablecloths with poker chips and dozens of human helpers. But by 1970, it had been developed into a simple computer program, Conway's Game of Life, which was described by Martin Gardner in his famous mathematical games column in Scientific American. The Game of Life column was an instant hit, and computer screens all over the world began to pulsate with a bizarre array of patterns. Figure 4b. As these activities drew increasing professional attention, a wide range of mathematically oriented scientists began to realize that the spontaneous emergence of self-sustaining patterns created in certain cellular automata were excellent models for the kinds of self-organizing patterns that had been so elusive in studies of fluid flow and biological growth. Since scaling structures are one of the hallmarks of both fluid turbulence and biological growth, the occurrence of fractal patterns in cellular automata attracted a great deal of interest. But more simple scaling structure, the logarithmic spiral, Figure 5, has garnered much of the attention. Even back in the 1950s, mathematician Alan Turing, whose theory of computation provided von Neumann with the inspiration for the first digital computer, began his research on biological morphogenesis, with an analysis of logarithmic spirals and growth patterns. Marcus, in 1991, notes the application areas for cellular automata models of spiral waves involve nerve axons, the retina, the surface of fertilized eggs, the cerebral cortex, heart tissue, and aggregating slime molds. In the text for KLab, the first comprehensive software for experimenting with cellular automata, mathematician Rudy Rucker refers to systems which produce paired log spirals as Chebodsky CAs, after the chemist who first observed such self-organizing patterns in artificial media. When you look at Chebodsky CAs, you're seeing very striking three-dimensional structures. Things like paired vortex sheets in the surface of a river below a dam, the scroll pair stretching all the way down to the river bottom. In 3 dimensions, a Chabinsky reaction would be like 2 paired nautilus shells, facing each other with their lips blending. The successive layers of such a growing pattern would build up very like a fetus. Figure 6 shows how the Awari marching group system can be used as a one-dimensional cellular automaton to demonstrate many of the dynamic phenomena produced on 2-dimensional systems. The Akan and other Ghanaian societies had a remarkable pre-colonial use of logarithmic spirals in iconic representations for self-organizing systems. Figure 7a. The Ghanaian spirals and the 4-armed computer graphic in Figure 5b are quite distant in terms of the machine technologies that produce them. But there may well be mathematical connections between the two, since cellular automata model the emergence of such patterns in modern scientific studies of living systems, and certain Ghanaian log spiral icons were also intended as generalized models for organic growth. It is not unreasonable to consider the possibility that the self-organizing dynamics observable in Awari were also linked to concepts of biological morphogenesis in traditional Ghanaian knowledge systems. Rattrade's classic volume on the Asante culture of Ghana includes a chapter on Awari, but unfortunately, it only covers the rules and strategies of the game. Recently, Kofi Agadowu of Ghana has written a booklet on Awari dedicated to Africans who are engaged in the formidable task of reclaiming their heritage, and he does note its association with reproduction. Wari, in the Ghanaian language Twi, means he or she marries. Herskovits, in 1930, noting that the Awari game, played by the descendants of African slaves in the New World, had retained some of the pre-colonial cultural associations from Africa, reports that Awari had a distinct sacred character to it, particularly involving the carving of the board. Awari boards with carvings of logarithmic spirals, Figure 7b, can be commonly found in Ghana today, suggesting that Western scientists may not be the only ones who developed an association between discrete self-organizing patterns and biological reproduction. It is a bit vindictive, but I can't help enjoying the thought of von Neumann, apostle of a mechanistic new world order that would wipe out the irrational cacophony of living systems, spinning in his grave every time we watch a cellular automaton, whether in pixels or Awari cups, bring forth chaos in the games of life.